If you're reading this, you're probably sitting comfortably indoors. Maybe you're near a window with a view of trees. Maybe you think trees are beautiful, peaceful, harmless pillars of nature that provide shade and oxygen and aesthetic value to your property. Let me tell you something that will change how you see every forest for the rest of your life. Trees are not individuals, they are fingers. And sometimes the hand they're attached to wakes up. My name is Robert Kane. I was a forest ranger in the Black Hills National Forest of South Dakota for 11 years. Past tense. I quit 3 months ago after spending 1 week in Survey Station Delta, a remote cabin 23 miles from the nearest road. I'm going to tell you what happened during that week. You won't believe me. That's fine. But the next time you walk through a forest and notice the trees seem closer than they were a moment ago, remember this story and run. I arrived at Survey Station Delta on a Monday in September. The assignment was routine. 7 days of forest health monitoring, documenting beetle damage, checking for disease patterns, measuring growth rates in old-growth pine stands. Standard wilderness research work. The cabin was exactly what I expected. 1 room, wood stove, cot, solar panel for minimal electricity, radio for emergency contact, supplies for a week. I'd done this type of isolation survey dozens of times. The forest around the cabin was pristine, ponderosa pine, some over 200 years old, standing in natural spacing that seemed almost deliberate. The undergrowth was minimal. Walking between the trees felt like walking through a cathedral, pillars of bark reaching toward a canopy so dense that the forest floor existed in permanent twilight. Beautiful, peaceful, perfect. I spent the first day setting up equipment, establishing my survey grid, photographing initial conditions. By 4 p.m., I was 3 miles northwest of the cabin, working my way through a section of forest that hadn't been surveyed in over a decade. That's when I found the circle. A perfectly circular clearing, maybe 300 feet in diameter, and I mean perfect, geometrically precise, like someone had used a compass to mark it out. The trees on the perimeter were standing normally. The trees inside the circle were all down, fallen, but not from wind or disease. They'd been cut. Not with chainsaws, not with axes. The trunks were smooth where they'd separated from their stumps, like they'd been severed with surgical precision. And they were arranged in a pattern, all pointing inward toward the center of the circle, creating a spiral design that hurt to look at for more than a few seconds. I photographed everything, documented the coordinates, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. No footprints, no equipment marks, no sign of human activity at all. Just trees that had somehow been cut with impossible precision and arranged in a pattern that made my eyes water. My radio crackled. "Station Delta, this is base. Checking in. How's your first day?" "Interesting," I said. "I found something unusual. A clearing with downed trees in a geometric pattern. Looks old, but I can't determine how it was created." "Probably logging from the 1970s. That area has some historical clear-cutting." "This isn't clear-cutting. This is deliberate, artistic almost." A pause. "Well, document it and we'll review when you return. Otherwise, everything okay? Yeah, all good. Delta out. I hiked back to the cabin as the sun set, my mind trying to categorize what I'd seen into something rational. Maybe it was logging. Maybe the spiral pattern was just pareidolia, my brain finding meaning in randomness. But those cuts were too clean, too precise. I made dinner, wrote up my field notes, and went to sleep around 9 p.m. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of trees creaking. The sound was loud, not normal forest settling. Dozens of trees groaning simultaneously, their wood flexing under stress I couldn't identify. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The forest was still, no wind. The trees stood exactly as they had when I'd gone to sleep, but the sound continued, a slow, rhythmic creaking that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I swept my flashlight beam across the tree line. Nothing unusual, just pines standing in the darkness, their bark catching the light, their branches motionless. Then I noticed something odd about the spacing. The trees closest to the cabin seemed closer than I remembered, not dramatically, just subtly, like they'd shifted a few inches while I wasn't looking. I told myself I was being paranoid, went back inside, tried to sleep. The creaking continued until 4 a.m., then stopped abruptly. The next morning, I measured the distance from the cabin door to the nearest tree, 15 feet, 3 inches. I photographed it, marked the measurement in my notes. Then I hiked back to the circle to take more detailed photographs in daylight. It had changed. The fallen trees were in different positions, still forming a spiral, but tighter now, more compressed, like something had adjusted them overnight, refining the pattern. And there were marks in the dirt at the center of the circle, not footprints, grooves, long parallel grooves like massive roots had pushed up through the soil and then retracted, leaving impressions behind. I radioed base. This is Delta. The clearing I reported yesterday has changed. The downed trees have moved. Moved? Kane, trees don't move. I know how it sounds, but the pattern is different from yesterday, significantly different. Could be animals. Bears sometimes roll logs around. These are full-sized ponderosa pines. Some of them weigh over a ton, and they've been repositioned in a specific geometric pattern. Another pause. Robert, are you feeling okay? Sometimes isolation can... I'm fine. I'm just reporting what I'm seeing. Okay, document everything and we'll review, but I want you to check in twice daily from now on, morning and evening. Understood? Understood. I spent the rest of the day surveying other sections of the forest, trying to focus on the actual job I'd been sent to do, but I couldn't stop thinking about the circle, about the grooves in the dirt, about the way the trees near the cabin seemed closer. That evening, before the sun set, I measured the distance to the nearest tree again. 14 feet, 7 inches. 8 inches closer than this morning. I photographed it, documented it, told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe I'd measured wrong the first time. Maybe the tree was on a slight incline and appeared closer from a different angle. But I knew what I was seeing. The trees were moving. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat at the cabin window with my flashlight, watching the tree line. At 11:34 p.m., I saw it happen. The nearest pine, the one I'd been measuring, shifted. Not dramatically, just a small adjustment. Its roots flexed beneath the soil, visible as ripples in the dirt, and the entire trunk moved forward by maybe 3 inches. then settled, became still again. I watched, barely breathing, as the tree next to it did the same thing, and the one next to that, a wave of movement spreading through the forest, each tree adjusting its position by a few inches, the collective effect creating a slow, patient advance toward the cabin. By dawn, they'd moved another 6 inches closer. The distance from cabin to nearest tree was now 13 feet 11 inches. I radioed base immediately. "This is Delta. I need extraction, now." "Kane, what's wrong?" "The trees are moving. They're surrounding the cabin. I've been documenting it, and—" "Kane, slow down. Trees don't move. You need to calm down, and—" "I am calm. I'm telling you what I'm observing. The forest around this cabin is actively changing position. Every tree has moved at least a foot closer since I arrived. I have measurements, photographs. This is really happening." Okay. I'm going to send someone out to check on you. They'll be there tomorrow afternoon. Can you hold out until then?" Tomorrow afternoon, 24 hours away. Yeah, I can hold out. Good. Stay inside the cabin. Don't go into the forest. Just wait for pickup. Understood? Understood. I spent the day inside, watching through the windows as the trees continued their glacial advance. By noon, they were 13 feet away. By 3 p.m., 12 feet 5 inches. By sunset, 11 feet 9 inches. They were maintaining a perfect circle around the cabin, not random movement, organized, coordinated, like a crowd of people slowly pressing inward, tightening the ring. And then I noticed the pattern. The trees weren't just moving closer, they were arranging themselves, adjusting their positions relative to each other, creating the same spiral design I'd seen in the clearing. The cabin was at the center, the trees were forming the pattern around it. The entire forest was one massive organism. The individual pines were just extensions of something larger, something underground, something that thought and planned and moved with terrifying patience. And it viewed the cabin as foreign, invasive, something that needed to be removed. At 8 p.m., the trees began tapping on the windows. The sound started as a gentle brush, branch tips touching glass, not aggressive, exploratory, like fingers testing the strength of a barrier. But the cabin windows were 12 feet off the ground, and the branches doing the tapping were coming from trees that stood 11 feet away. They were bending, reaching, extending themselves in ways that shouldn't be anatomically possible. I backed away from the windows and stood in the center of the cabin, my chainsaw in hand. I'd grabbed it from the equipment shed that afternoon, some instinct telling me I might need it. The tapping intensified, more branches, more windows. The sound became rhythmic, deliberate, like the forest was testing each window in sequence, looking for weakness. Then one of the branches pressed harder. The glass cracked. I fired up the chainsaw. The noise was deafening in the small cabin, the two-stroke engine screaming, the chains spinning at thousands of RPM, cutting nothing but producing sustained, aggressive sound. The tapping stopped immediately. I kept the chainsaw running for 30 seconds, then let it die. Silence. The forest had withdrawn. The branches were no longer touching the windows. I'd found their weakness. Sound. Mechanical noise. The trees responded to the vibration, recoiled from it, like it confused or disrupted whatever sensory mechanism they used to coordinate movement. I kept the chainsaw next to me all night, starting it up whenever the tapping resumed. Each time, the forest would retreat, pull back, give me space. But each time, the retreat was smaller, shorter, like the organism was learning, adapting, understanding that the sound was just noise, not an actual threat. By morning, the trees were 8 feet from the cabin walls. I could see their bark through the windows, could smell the pine resin, could hear the collective breathing of the forest, that slow creaking sound, now constant and rhythmic. My radio was dead. I'd tried to call base at dawn. Nothing. The solar panel had been covered overnight by branches that had grown across the roof, blocking the sunlight, draining the battery. I was trapped. No communication, no power, surrounded by a forest that was slowly, patiently crushing the cabin into its center. The extraction team was supposed to arrive this afternoon, but they'd have to drive the access road, and I hadn't checked the access road in 3 days. I looked out the window toward where the road should be visible through the trees. All I saw was forest, dense, seamless, like there had never been a road at all. I made my decision at noon. Stay and wait for rescue that might not come, or run and try to reach the road before the forest sealed it completely. I packed light, radio, GPS, knife, the chainsaw with 2 extra fuel cans, enough supplies for 2 days of hard hiking. Then I opened the cabin door. The trees were 5 feet away, forming a wall of bark and branches that moved slightly as I emerged, adjusting, orienting toward me like sunflowers tracking the sun. I started the chainsaw and walked forward. The trees recoiled, just slightly, just enough to let me through. I walked into the forest with the chainsaw held in front of me like a talisman, the noise cutting through the collective consciousness of the organism, forcing it to open a path. I moved fast. The GPS showed the access road was 2 miles south, 2 miles through forest that was actively trying to prevent my escape. The trees closed behind me as I walked. I could hear them moving, roots flexing, trunks shifting, creating a solid wall that cut off any retreat back to the cabin. That was fine. I wasn't going back. At the 1-mile mark, the chainsaw sputtered, running low on fuel. I stopped, set it down, and started refueling as quickly as possible. That's when the branches grabbed me. They came from above, long, flexible pine branches that had grown down from the canopy, extending themselves to impossible lengths. They wrapped around my arms, my chest, my neck. Not tight, not choking, just holding, preventing me from moving, preventing me from restarting the chainsaw. The forest went silent, except for that slow, rhythmic creaking, and I felt it then, not with my ears, in my mind, a presence, vast and patient and utterly alien, the collective consciousness of the organism focusing its attention on me. It didn't communicate in words, in concepts, in pure meaning downloaded directly into my brain. It wanted to break down the cabin, wanted to reclaim the space, wanted to return the clearing to forest, eliminate the foreign structure, restore the natural pattern. And it wanted to absorb me too, not kill me. Absorb, make me part of the collective, add my consciousness to the network, let me exist as part of the organism instead of separate from it. It was offering integration, unity, an end to isolation and fear and the constant burden of being a discrete, separate entity. Just like the void offered Earl Dawson silence, just like the lighthouse offered the drowned service, just like all the ancient things offered exactly what desperate humans wanted most. I screamed and tore free. The branches released me, not because I was strong enough to break them, because the scream disrupted the connection, sound, vibration, breaking the concentration required to maintain the organism's control. I grabbed the chainsaw, fired it up with one pull, and ran. The last mile to the road was a nightmare, trees shifting position ahead of me, trying to block the path, roots rising up to trip me, branches reaching down to grab, the entire forest moving in coordination, trying to prevent my escape without crushing me outright. It wanted me alive, wanted me conscious, wanted to absorb me whole. I burst onto the access road at 3:47 p.m., covered in scratches, gasping, the chainsaw nearly out of fuel again. Behind me, the forest was closing, trees moving onto the road, filling in the gap, sealing the passage. I ran down the gravel road, not looking back, the sound of the organism's pursuit loud in my ears, creaking wood, shifting roots, the patient, inexorable advance of something that had all the time in the world. At 4 miles, I saw the extraction vehicle, a Park Service truck, driving toward me, dust rising behind it. I collapsed in the middle of the road. The driver jumped out. "Kane, what happened? You look like hell!" I turned around and pointed back towards Survey Station Delta. The road behind me was gone, just forest, dense, seamless, unbroken, like there had never been a road at all, like the cabin had never existed, like I'd somehow materialized out of solid woodland. "The trees," I gasped. "They moved! They're alive! They're all connected!" The driver looked at where I was pointing, looked at me, looked back at the forest. "Let's get you to medical," he said quietly. They found nothing. The extraction team went back 3 days later with GPS coordinates, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar. They found the location where Survey Station Delta should have been. There was no cabin, no clearing, just old-growth ponderosa pine forest, dense and healthy, showing no signs of disturbance. The trees in that area were measured and mapped. Their positions matched historical surveys from 1987. They hadn't moved. My measurements, my photographs, my documentation, all dismissed as stress-induced hallucination, isolation psychosis. I was given a medical discharge, sent to counseling, prescribed medication I don't take, because I know what I experienced was real, and I have proof. 3 months after I escaped the forest, I started feeling pain in my arms. Sharp, stabbing sensations in places where the branches had grabbed me. The doctors found nothing. No injuries, no nerve damage, no physical cause. But the pain is real, and it's getting worse, spreading, branching out from the original contact points, creating patterns under my skin, patterns that look like roots. Like the organism's touch left something behind, some microscopic connection, some fragment of the collective consciousness still trying to integrate me. I don't go near forests anymore, don't even like being near houseplants, because sometimes, when I'm very still, I can feel it, the pull, the invitation, the organism reaching out across hundreds of miles, trying to establish contact, trying to complete what it started, trying to absorb me. The trees are not separate entities. They are extensions of something larger, something underground, something that has been growing and thinking and organizing itself for thousands of years. And sometimes it wakes up. Survey Station Delta is gone, absorbed, returned to the pattern. The forest sealed over it like skin healing around a splinter, eliminating the foreign object, restoring itself to wholeness. I was supposed to be absorbed too. I escaped. But I think part of me is still there, part of my consciousness still connected to the collective, because on quiet nights, when the wind is still and the world goes silent, I can hear it. The creaking, the breathing, the slow, patient movement of something vast turning its attention toward me. The forest is calling. And one day, I know I'll answer. Not because I want to, because the connection is already established, the integration already begun. I'm not fully separate anymore. I'm already halfway absorbed. The phantom pain in my arms tells me so. The patterns spreading under my skin tell me so. The dreams of standing in perfect darkness surrounded by the breathing of trees tell me so. If you're reading this, learn from my mistake. The trees are not individuals. They are fingers. And when the hand wakes up, you don't want to be standing in its palm.
Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's get started. Imagine a forest so quiet that your own heartbeat becomes deafening. No bird song, no insect hum, no wind through the leaves, just absolute silence pressing against your eardrums like water at depth. Now imagine realizing that silence isn't empty, it's full of a sound frequency so high-pitched that your conscious mind can't process it, but your body can. And that frequency is a weapon, a territorial claim, a predator clearing its hunting ground by turning sound itself into death. My name is Graham Torres. I'm an ornithologist and wildlife sound recordist based in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I've spent 23 years documenting bird populations across the Appalachian region using high-end audio equipment capable of capturing frequencies far beyond human hearing range. On October 12, 2024, I discovered that some frequencies shouldn't be recorded. Some sounds, once captured, mark you as a threat, and some silences are actually screaming so loud they kill everything that can hear them. This is what happened when I found the killing field. Raven's Bluff is a known stopover point for migratory warblers traveling the Atlantic Flyway. Every October, hundreds of birds pass through the area, drawn by dense insect populations and protective canopy cover. I'd been monitoring the site for 3 years, documenting arrival patterns and species diversity. October 12th should have been peak migration. Weather conditions were perfect. Clear skies, light winds, temperature in the mid-60s. Based on my previous data, I expected to find at least 40 species active in the area. I arrived at the trailhead at 6:47 a.m., carrying my usual equipment, a Sennheiser MKH-8040 shotgun microphone, a Sound Devices MixPre 10-2 recorder, capable of capturing frequencies up to 192 kHz, binoculars, field notebook. I'd made this hike dozens of times. The first mile was normal. I heard mockingbirds, Carolina wrens, a distant pileated woodpecker hammering on dead wood, standard dawn chorus for this habitat. At mile 1.3, the birdsong stopped. Not gradually, abruptly, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment I was surrounded by normal forest sounds, the next, complete silence. I stopped walking and listened. Nothing. No birds, no insects, no rustling in the underbrush, just wind moving through the canopy high above. I checked my equipment. The recorder was functioning normally. The microphone was working, but it was capturing only ambient noise, no biological sounds at all. I continued hiking. The silence deepened. By mile 1.6, even the wind seemed muted. Leaves moved overhead, but made no sound. My boots on the trail were too loud, invasive, wrong. At mile 1.8, I found the first dead bird. A Blackburnian warbler, male, lying on the trail in perfect condition. No obvious injuries, no blood, no sign of predation, just dead, its feathers still bright orange and black, its eyes open and clear. I knelt down and examined it carefully. The body was fresh, still slightly warm. It had died within the last hour. I placed it in a specimen bag and continued walking. 20 yards further, I found 3 more, Cape May warblers, all dead, all in perfect condition. Then I found the clearing. The clearing was roughly circular, maybe 50 feet across, and it was carpeted with dead birds. Dozens of them, warblers, thrushes, vireos, tanagers, all fallen mid-flight, all lying where they'd dropped, wings partially extended, mouths open. No wounds, no decay, just dozens of small bodies scattered across leaf litter like someone had turned off gravity for a moment and let them all fall at once. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding, trying to process what I was seeing. Mass die-offs happen, collisions with buildings, pesticide poisoning, disease outbreaks, but this was different. The birds were too spread out for a collision event, too diverse for species-specific disease, and they'd all died simultaneously, judging by the uniformity of body condition. I pulled out my recorder and started documenting, made verbal notes describing the scene, the species present, the lack of obvious cause of death. Then I switched the recorder to high-frequency mode and did a sweep of the area. What I captured made my blood run cold. At 38 kilohertz, just above the upper limit of human hearing, there was a pulse, regular, rhythmic, a beat pattern that repeated every 2.3 seconds. It was faint on the recording, but unmistakable once I knew to look for it. I increased the sensitivity and swept again. The pulse was stronger at 42 kilohertz, even stronger at 47 kilohertz. At 52 kilohertz, it was overwhelming, drowning out all other ambient sound. I switched to visual waveform display on my recorder. The pulse pattern appeared as sharp spikes, perfectly regular, incredibly powerful. This wasn't background noise. This was a signal, deliberate, targeted, broadcasting continuously at frequencies only animals could perceive. Birds hear up to about 10 kilohertz depending on species. Bats can hear up to 200 kilohertz. Insects range from 10 kilohertz to 100 kilohertz. The frequency I was recording fell right in the middle of that range, perfectly calibrated to affect the widest possible spectrum of animal life while remaining completely inaudible to humans. I looked at the dead birds again. They hadn't been poisoned or attacked. They'd been hit by a sonic weapon, a frequency so intense that it had disrupted their neurological function, causing immediate death. But weapons need operators. Someone or something was broadcasting this frequency, using it to clear this area of all competing life. I looked around the clearing more carefully, searching for equipment, transmitters, any sign of human activity. That's when I noticed the center of the clearing. There was a depression there, roughly circular, maybe 10 feet in diameter. The leaf litter inside was undisturbed, but the soil underneath looked wrong, darker, denser, like it had been compacted by extreme pressure. I approached carefully, my recorder still running, capturing the high-frequency pulse that grew stronger with every step. At the edge of the depression, I stopped. The air above it was shimmering, not with heat, with something else, vibration. The atmosphere itself was resonating, creating visible distortion like you see above highway asphalt on hot days. I held up my hand. The air felt thick, resistant, like pushing through water. The pulse frequency spiked on my recorder, 58 kilohertz, 63 kilohertz, 71 kilohertz. The sound was intensifying, focusing on me. And that's when I understood. There was no equipment, no transmitter, no human operator. The entity was the source, a non-corporeal energy field occupying the depression, broadcasting high-frequency sound to clear its territory of all competing life. The birds had flown into range and dropped dead instantly, their nervous systems overloaded by frequencies their biology couldn't filter out. And now I was in range too. My ears began to ring. The ringing started as a faint, high-pitched whine. Then it intensified. Pressure built in my skull. My vision blurred at the edges. The entity was targeting me. I stumbled backward, away from the depression. The ringing decreased slightly, but didn't stop. I was already exposed, already marked as a threat because I'd recorded its frequency, captured its territorial signature. My recorder was still running, still capturing the pulse in crystal-clear digital audio, creating a permanent record of the entity's sonic weapon. And the entity knew. The air in the clearing began to shimmer more violently. The pulse frequency shifted, climbing higher. 79 kilohertz, 84 kilohertz, 91 kilohertz, approaching the upper limits of what my equipment could capture. I looked at my recorder. The waveform display showed the pulses getting tighter, more concentrated. The entity was ramping up its broadcast, preparing to emit a frequency powerful enough to affect even humans who shouldn't be able to hear these ranges at all. I had two options: destroy my equipment and hope the entity interpreted that as submission, as removing the threat, or run with the equipment and risk being pursued by an entity that could weaponize sound itself. The pressure in my skull intensified. Blood started trickling from my nose. The frequency was already affecting me, even below the threshold that would cause immediate death. I made my decision. I dropped my recorder on the ground and smashed it with a rock. The screen shattered, the circuit boards cracked, the solid-state memory fractured. The high-frequency pulse immediately decreased in intensity. Not stopped, just reduced. The entity was still broadcasting, still maintaining its territory, but the aggressive targeting had ceased. I'd removed the threat, destroyed the recording,
shown submission. But the damage was already done. I'd been exposed for too long. The frequency had embedded itself in my auditory system, burning patterns into my cochlear nerves that would never fully heal. I picked up the remains of my $4,000 recorder and ran.
The trail back to the parking lot was 1.8 miles. I covered it in 12 minutes, running harder than I'd run since college, my expensive microphone still slung over my shoulder, my field bag bouncing against my back. The ringing in my ears didn't stop. If anything, he'd got worse, louder, more insistent, like the entity's frequency had imprinted itself on my nervous system and was now playing on endless loop inside my head. At mile 0.6, the ringing changed pitch, went higher, more aggressive. I glanced back. The air behind me was shimmering. The entity was following, moving through the forest as a wave of compressed atmosphere, broadcasting its killing frequency, clearing a path behind me of all living things. Birds fell from trees as I passed, squirrels dropped from branches, insects rained from the canopy. Everything that could perceive the frequency was dying, and I was next if I didn't get out of range. I ran harder, my lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the shimmer was getting closer. The entity was faster than me, unbound by terrain or physical form, flowing through the forest like water downhill. At mile 0.3, my vision started to tunnel. The frequency was affecting my visual cortex now, cross-wiring signals, causing synesthesia. I could see the sound, not metaphorically, literally see it as waves of pressure rippling through the air, each pulse a visible compression of reality itself. The parking lot appeared ahead, my truck, escape. I burst out of the tree line and threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, turned the key. The engine started. I threw it in reverse and floored the accelerator, tires spinning on gravel, the truck lurching backward away from the trailhead. Through the windshield, I saw the shimmer emerge from the forest. The entity paused at the tree line, its frequency pulse visible as distortions in the air, considering whether to pursue further. Then it retreated, flowed back into the forest, returned to its territory. I'd escaped its range, removed myself from the killing field, submitted by destroying my equipment and fleeing. The entity had claimed victory, maintained its territory, eliminated the threat. I drove for 20 minutes before I felt safe enough to pull over, parked at a gas station, sat in my truck shaking, blood still trickling from my nose, the ringing in my ears a constant, maddening presence. I'd survived, but I'd brought something back with me. The frequency, embedded in my auditory system, playing forever at the edge of perception. I went to a hospital. They did scans, hearing tests, neurological workups, found nothing physically wrong. My eardrums were intact, my cochlear nerves showed normal function, my brain activity was unremarkable. But the ringing didn't stop. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a constant high-pitched whine at approximately 52 kilohertz, just above human hearing range, but somehow audible to me because I'd been exposed at close range for too long. The doctors called it tinnitus, prescribed white noise machines and cognitive behavioral therapy, said it would fade with time. It didn't fade. It got worse, because I'd started to understand what the ringing actually was. Not damage, not trauma, not a phantom sound generated by my injured nervous system. It was the entity, still broadcasting, still maintaining its territory, and I could hear it because exposure had permanently altered my auditory processing, expanding my hearing range into frequencies humans aren't meant to perceive. I'd been marked,
changed, made into something that could detect the entity's presence from miles away. I tested the theory 2 weeks later, drove back to Raven's Bluff, parked 2 miles from the trailhead. The ringing immediately intensified, became directional, pointed me toward the killing field like a compass needle finding north. The entity was still there, still broadcasting, still clearing its territory of all animal life. And now I could always hear it, could always feel its presence, a constant reminder of what lived in that clearing, using silence as camouflage, while actually screaming loud enough to kill.
I couldn't let it go, couldn't accept that something like this existed and I was the only one who knew about it. I started researching, found 7 other locations in the Appalachian region with similar characteristics. Places where bird populations mysteriously crashed, where insect diversity dropped to 0, where hikers reported feeling uncomfortable, nauseous, disoriented, for no apparent reason. Dead zones, silence zones, areas where the normal background chorus of forest life just stopped. I contacted other ornithologists, shared my findings, carefully, without mentioning the entity directly, just noting the pattern of mass die-offs and asking if anyone had recorded unusual audio signatures. 3 researchers responded. They'd noticed the same thing, pockets of silence in areas that should be teeming with life, high-frequency anomalies on their recordings, equipment failures in specific locations. One of them, Dr. Helen O'Coffer from Georgia, sent me a recording. She'd captured the same pulse pattern I'd found, 52 kilohertz, regular intervals, broadcasting from a clearing in the Chattahoochee National Forest. "I didn't know what I was hearing until I saw your data," she wrote, "but I've been back to that site 3 times and I can't record there anymore. My equipment fails and I get terrible migraines that last for days afterward." She'd been marked too, exposed to the frequency, changed. I compiled everything, locations, frequency patterns, die-off reports, created a map showing 7 confirmed sites across 4 states. They formed a pattern, not random, evenly spaced, like territories, like hunting grounds maintained by multiple entities, each one broadcasting its claim, warning others to stay away. The entities weren't unique. They were a species or a phenomenon, something that existed in the Appalachian wilderness, using high-frequency sound to carve out territories and eliminate competition. And we'd walked into their space, recorded their signatures, marked ourselves as threats. 6 months after the incident at Raven's Bluff, I can't do my job anymore. Can't record birds, can't enter forests without the ringing intensifying to unbearable levels. My hearing has been permanently altered, expanded into frequency ranges that let me perceive things humans aren't meant to detect. I hear the entities now, all of them. Whenever I'm near one of the dead zones, the ringing becomes directional, focused, turning me into a living detector of their presence. Dr. O'Coffer experiences the same thing. So do the other 2 researchers who responded to my inquiry. We've formed an unofficial support group, compare notes, share experiences, try to understand what we've become. We're marked, changed, made into something between normal humans and the entities themselves. We can perceive their frequencies, but not control them. We exist in both worlds, but belong to neither. The ringing never stops. Even when I'm far from the dead zones, I can hear a faint background pulse, the entities broadcasting to each other across vast distances, maintaining their territories, communicating in frequencies that cause instant death to anything that can fully perceive them. I sleep with white noise machines running at maximum volume. It doesn't help. The frequency cuts through everything, a constant, maddening reminder that I destroyed my equipment, but kept the recording where it matters most, burned into my nervous system permanently.
I went back to the clearing one more time, 3 months ago, February 2025, dead of winter. The killing field was still there, still silent, still carpeted with the skeletal remains of birds that had died back in October, perfectly preserved by the absence of decomposers. Even bacteria couldn't survive in that space. Even microorganisms were destroyed by the frequency. The depression in the center was deeper now. The entity had settled, established permanent residence. The shimmer in the air was constant, visible even to normal human vision as a heat mirage effect that never faded. I stood at the edge of the clearing, the ringing in my ears reaching a screaming pitch, and I understood finally what I was looking at. The silence isn't empty. It's full. The entity isn't quiet. It's screaming, broadcasting at frequencies so high and so powerful that they kill everything capable of hearing them, creating apparent silence by eliminating all the creatures that would normally make sound. The predator's cloak isn't invisibility, it's inaudibility. The entity hides by being too loud for most life to survive perceiving it. Only beings that can tolerate the frequency can exist in its territory. And I'm one of them now, changed, adapted, able to hear the screaming silence and survive it. I don't know if that's evolution or curse, don't know if the entity changed me deliberately or if my nervous system adapted on its own to protect itself from further damage. But I know I can't unhear it, can't go back to the world where forests are peaceful and silence is empty. I exist now in a reality where I hear the predators that hunt by being too loud for their prey to survive perceiving them. 7 dead zones, 7 entities, 7 territories claimed by creatures that weaponize sound, and 7 humans who can now hear them, who carry the frequency inside us like a parasite, who will never know silence again, because silence is actually the loudest thing in the forest. I don't work as an ornithologist anymore, can't do field work, can't enter forests without the ringing becoming unbearable. I teach now. University courses, lecture halls with thick walls that dampen the frequencies I'm cursed to hear. But sometimes, late at night, when the campus is quiet and I'm alone in my office, I pull up the map. Look at the 7 confirmed dead zones, the territories claimed by entities that kill with sound. And I wonder how many more there are. How many pockets of silence exist in wilderness areas around the world, each one hiding a predator that broadcasts frequencies loud enough to kill. The equipment I destroyed at Ravensbluff is gone, but I don't need equipment anymore. I'm a living detector. A biological frequency meter permanently tuned to perceive the entity's broadcasts. Dr. Okafor and I have started documenting new sites, dead zones we can locate just by driving nearby and noting when the ringing intensifies. We're up to 14 confirmed locations now, all of them in the Appalachian region, all of them broadcasting the same pulse pattern at frequencies between 45 kHz and 65 kHz. The entities are territorial but not aggressive to humans unless threatened. They only target us if we record their frequencies, if we create permanent documentation of their existence. Otherwise, they let us pass through their territories unharmed, invisible to us, our ears too limited to hear their screaming. But once you record them, once you capture their signature, you become a threat. And they respond the only way they know how, by intensifying their broadcast until you either destroy the evidence or die from exposure. I chose to destroy the evidence, saved my life but lost my career, lost the ability to experience true silence.
gained the ability to hear predators that hunt by being too loud for their prey to survive perceiving them. If you are a researcher, if you work in forests, if you use high-frequency recording equipment, be careful what you capture, because some sounds once recorded mark you forever. Some frequencies once heard never stop playing in your head. Some silences are actually screaming so loud that they kill everything that listens. The birds at Ravensbluff fell from the sky in perfect condition, killed instantly by a weapon they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't escape. They died hearing something I can now hear all the time, something that will never stop, never fade, never give me back the simple silence I took for granted before I entered that clearing. The silence that ate the birds is eating me too, slowly, constantly, one frequency at a time. And I can't make it stop, can't turn it off, can't go back to the world where silence is empty instead of full. The predator's cloak is perfect. It hides by being too loud to hear, too powerful to perceive, too alien to understand. Until you record it, document it, prove it exists. Then it makes sure you hear nothing else for the rest of your life. The ringing never stops, never fades, never gives me peace. And somewhere in the Appalachian wilderness, in a clearing carpeted with dead birds, an entity broadcasts its territorial claim at frequencies that kill. Still there, still hunting, still screaming in frequencies only the dead and the marked can hear. The silence that ate the birds is eating me, too.
Friends, that was the story for today. I hope you enjoyed it and that it stayed with you in the best chilling way possible. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Your time and support truly mean more than you know. This channel is growing because of listeners like you. If you want more real and disturbing encounters like this, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel continue bringing these stories to life. And if this story gave you chills, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and your thoughts make this community stronger. Until next time, turn off the lights, double-check the room, and I'll see you in the next story.